Welcome everyone once again to the regular weekly show on YouTube Spain, where we ask the experts what you want to know about moving to Spain. I'm Skatz, and today I'll be talking with a property expert about buying and renting property in Spain. Plus, of course, we'll be answering viewers' questions from YouTube and Facebook on that and anything else to do with moving to Spain. So stick around to the end and enjoy the show. Of course, you can ask questions on the live chat if you're watching live, or in the comments below if you're watching the recording. And within a few days of the live show, you can find the time codes for all of the answers you need in the video description below to save you having to scroll through and find them over and over again. So welcome to YouTube Spain. Cue the music. So just before we begin, don't forget you can get your very own YouTube Spain t-shirts and hoodies and other goodies from our merchandise page. And you can post questions on the YouTube Spain Facebook group and chat with people like you who are moving to Spain or have done so already. And the links to all of those can be found in the video description below. There's a little arrow somewhere down there. If you can't find it, ask me in the comments. And once again, we're going to be having some prizes to give away for the best questions and comments from you. So without further ado, let's meet my guest for the day. It's Mathew Wood from Lanjaron Property. Hola, Mathew.
Hola, amigo. ¿Qué tal?
Hey, muy bien. There we go. I'm learning fast. So, how is it? How are you doing over there? You're over in Lanjaron, which is Granada province, isn't it?
Yes, over in Granada province, just up in the Alpujarras. It's lovely here today. I've got a beautiful view, similar to yours actually, with the mountains looking down towards the Mediterranean, and the sun is shining. So no better place to be in winter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's beautiful here today. I mean, this people have been asking me to show them the view from out of the window that I'm facing up there for a few weeks now. So I thought I'll take a picture and put it up behind me on the green screen. So
Great idea.
And this actually is not quite the view from out of the window because there are some cables going past the window, so I've gone up about 100 meters and taken the view, but it looks more or less like that. So
yes, yeah.
There we go. So let's get straight on. And first of all, tell us whereabouts in Spain are you based? You've already done that, and a little bit about Lanjaron Property and what you do.
Yeah, pretty easy. We sell property for people and help people find property. But most importantly, I think, is trying to do it in a truly professional way by being honest and open about everything that we do, because there are so many pitfalls to buying property in Spain that helping people avoid those pitfalls is really what we're all about. And part of that was born from my own experience of buying a property in Spain. Initially, I came over here to retire from my property business in the UK. But it didn't take long to find retirement wasn't quite what I was expecting it to be. I got a little bit bored. And as people found out what I did, they started to ask me to help them, and it just snowballed from there, really.
Excellent. Let's see. I've had several questions from Facebook, and I'm just going to mention a few to start with, because they're asking the basic questions, and we're going to be covering these basic questions. But I thought I'll give them a name check anyway. So
of course,
let's put the first one up on here, and it is from no, it's not that one. Get it together, Skatz. Here we go. It's from Neve Perez Abadia. That's a nice name.
Yeah.
I would like information about buying property in Spain. There you go, Neve. You're in the right place. So we've given you a name check there. And the other one is from O. How difficult, says Christine, how difficult is it to buy property after Brexit? So we'll come to that one in the basic questions.
Yeah.
There we go. And we'll come to all of the other questions in a bit. There's another one from Claire, actually. Let's put that one up now. Claire Jones, who actually came through from Go Spain, which is a group that you're connected with, a Facebook group.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
I like to give them a name check all the time, because a lot of the questions we get are through people on there, and I've written articles for their online magazine, as I think you have too.
Yes, yeah. It's a very good group with some good information. There's quite a lot of, I find there's a lot of Facebook groups around where you get a lot of opinions but very little fact. It's nice to have one that's more fact-based.
It is. And Lyndon Greensit was actually my guest last week. He's one of he's the one who runs the thing. So so Claire Jones says, hi, if you buy a house as a cash buyer, how long approximately does it take to go through? So we're going to be talking about the process a little bit later on, Claire. So thank you for that question. That's good. So yeah, let's get straight on then with the list of questions that I have, and we'll pop in viewers' questions as we go along, and the people who are on the chat. So if you were moving to Spain right now, thinking of buying a house, knowing what you know now, what would you do first?
What would I do first? I think that the first thing I would do, knowing what I know now, is to do a lot more research in terms of the facts around buying property. One common mistake I think a lot of people make when moving, particularly from another country, is to make the assumption that the rules and regulations around buying a property are the same as in their home country. I think also everyone's probably heard many horror stories about buying illegal houses and things like that. And it becomes a bit, particularly for people from the UK, where planning is very strict. And if you built a house illegally, the council will be on you in minutes. Understanding how the process works. And secondly, I think finding someone you can genuinely trust to help you. Having that contact and someone you can trust to get the proper advice from. So those would be my main 2 points. Research far more the differences in the rules between where you're coming from and Spain, and finding a trusted advisor to help you. Yeah,
and my next question is, how on earth do you choose which estate agent to deal with, and how can you tell they're kosher? Is there a regulatory organisation? Is there some kind of badge you can look for with standards of business practice?
Yeah, simple answer is yes. There are some groups. CIRA is one that we're a member of, the Spanish International Realty Alliance, and that's part of the overall Realtor Group, which is a big membership network across the world. But in essence, it is a difficult task, because legally there's nothing to stop anyone opening up as an estate agent, calling themselves an estate agent, and trying to sell property in Spain. It's a highly unregulated environment, and unfortunately that does mean that, sadly, I hate to say it in my industry, but there are a lot of people out there who are not trustworthy, and so it is difficult to find someone to have any sort of proof, because it's unregulated. So I think the best way is probably to use places like Go Spain, people like yourself, to again do some research and get to know who are the people out there that you can trust.
Very good. Yeah. I mean, Go Spain is good because because they've got such a big membership. I think they're up to 20,000 now, that you can ask for recommendations on there. And I say recommendations are the best thing, because people are very, very quick to complain if an estate agent has done them in.
Yeah, so, I think also look out for the content that an agent is putting out there. So do they have, for example, a YouTube channel with advice videos that they're putting out there to help you for free, ebooks downloadable from their website with all the information in? Because I think if an agent is putting that information out there for you, that gives an indication that they're not trying to hide things. They're trying to be open about everything. So that could be a good thing as well, is to look at the content that someone is putting out.
This is true. We've got a comment all about that from Estate Agent Training. Recommended agents and their social media presence are so important.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few people. Lee, I just say a quick shout out to some people on the chat. Lee Harding, one of our regulars, loving the view, Skatz. And Wendy says, is that an image of your view? Wow. And Barry from Unitech, hello again, Barry. And he says, yay, it's the view from the window that we've been waiting for. So looks good. And Ghazi again, hello Ghazi. I don't even know what your real name is. That's just your That's just your handle on the live chat. So maybe you can tell us that. Don't know whether you're male or female. Whether that matters or not, I don't know. But there you go. So, next question: What's the biggest mistake that house hunters make when buying in Spain?
Well, it's an interesting one. I think that there's a variety of common mistakes that people can make. One of them, I find, strangely, this is something. If you look at a question that's asked a lot on many Facebook groups, they'll often say, never use the lawyer that the agent recommends. And to some degree, I would agree with that. However, we do recommend some local lawyers that we have experience of working with. And one example of that would be, we were selling a property that was off grid, so solar powered, no mains connections. And the buyer was using a lawyer that was based over in Marbella. And the lawyer kept asking for the electricity bills and the confirmation of connection of electricity, etc. And after a rather lengthy conversation with him, ultimately he said, he did admit, when I said, do you have any experience of dealing with off-grid properties, he admitted that he had no experience whatsoever, and could I help him through the process. So it's one of those that's a difficult one. I think have a good legal advisor, and be careful when selecting that. But it doesn't necessarily mean, if you have an agent that you can trust and are comfortable with, actually do take their advice on who might be the best person to help you through. So yeah, the biggest mistake I think a lot of people make is not understanding exactly what they're getting into, in terms of going back to what I said before, where they kind of assume things are going to be the same as from their home country. So I think you cannot get enough professional advice, but often always avoid some of the advice that you might get on social media groups, etc., because usually that's one person's opinion of one transaction. So it's a very narrow viewpoint. I think get a broader view.
That's true. And you always get more complaints than good advice on Facebook in general,
absolutely.
in social media. Yeah. So yeah, there are some horror stories, but
definitely.
they're a small percentage. Good. And so what are the main concerns that people have about buying in Spain?
I think the main concerns I hear from people tend to be often visa related rather than necessarily property related, but they often go hand in hand. Certainly the legal situation with properties is something many people are I think confused by as well, because you've got different levels of legal. So a property might be, or a building might be legal, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a vivienda or a house that you can live in permanently. So probably the biggest thing people are worried about is the legalities. The other one I get a lot about is to do surrounding mortgages, and using mortgages to buy property in Spain, because the rules again are very different to many parts, or many other countries. And I think finally the other one is actually the way that Spain works in general, with the autonomous regions, and then each local town hall or ayuntamiento having its own rules and regulations. So it can be a bit confusing as to what works, because what might be the right advice, for example, here in the Alpujarra, would be completely different advice if you were buying up in Aragon or up in the north of Spain. So it can be quite confusing for people when there's these differences.
Yes, it's good to have local knowledge, isn't it? It's also good. We're talking about getting a good lawyer. It's local knowledge is just as important as the...
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so, the lawyers that we deal with, they will physically go and visit the property in order to know exactly what they're talking about and what they're researching. Whereas if you've got a lawyer, for example, in 200-300 kilometers away that's doing the work for you, they're not going to visit, or very unlikely they'll visit the property. So it'd be easy for them to miss things that are there.
So we'll have a question from Tony. This one came from Facebook. Tony's another really good Facebook group. Thanks for the question, Tony. So if you sell your house in Spain, are you liable for tax on the sale of the Spanish property, or is it only if you make a profit, or do any changes or improvements? Does this come off any tax if you pay this?
Great question, Tony, and one that is There's not really a quick and simple answer to this because there are a lot of caveats, but the short answer is yes, if you make a capital gain or a profit on a property in Spain when you sell it, then you need to pay tax on that. That can vary between whether you're a resident or a non-resident. There are some exceptions to that. For example, if you reinvest the full amount that you're selling for into another property in Spain, then you don't usually have to pay capital gains. And if you're over the age of 65 and have been registered, usually on the empadronamiento, as living at that property for 3 years, then you also can avoid paying capital gains. So the short answer is yes, you pay it on a profit, but there are some caveats that mean that sometimes you don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
And there are also lots of deductions you can make against capital gains as well, such as your purchase costs, your agent selling fees, your lawyer's costs. So there's various things you can use to reduce that. But it's one of those things, if you're unsure, speak to someone who knows the ins and outs of your personal situation, and then you can get the best advice.
Yeah, get a good Hestor.
Yes.
So we have Alan, how do we pronounce that? Machaffey. And he says, morning, gents. One thing I flagged up was the non-infraction certificate. If I remember, this is where the property has been extended in the past and not declared. It was 35 square meters bigger than the deeds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another common thing, unfortunately, in Spain is people doing work without the correct permissions and certificates. There are, again, this changes from ayuntamiento to ayuntamiento, but it can even be down as small as something like changing a window or changing a kitchen. You might need a permission for that. Very few people will ever get it. And there is a report you can get from the local town halls to say that they are not planning to pursue anything that they may be aware of that's wrong with the property. But it's one of those things, again, it comes down to each individual property. I'd be uncomfortable saying to someone without knowing the full details of yes or no, you need this or you don't, because it's quite a lot of detail. But so again, it's get great legal advice on your specific circumstances.
Good answer. By the way, everybody, if you're getting good information from this video, do click on the like button. I know everybody on YouTube says click on the like button, subscribe, do all that stuff, but yeah, don't forget it really does help the channel. But not only does it help the channel, it helps you to get this appearing in your feed all of the time, so you get all the information you need. So I'm not afraid of pushing that. So we talked about, we'll come back to buying a property in a minute, but this is this is one more about buying, but it's got something to do with rentals. Can you get good rental returns to cover your mortgage and bills? So if you buy a property to rent off?
I guess, again, the simple answer is yes, you can, but not everywhere. Different places will have far better returns, and it also depends if you're looking at the holiday let market or a long-term let market. They don't have buy-to-let mortgages in Spain in the same way that are fairly common in the UK. But a lot of people will use a mortgage to buy a property, maybe use it for a holiday home, and then use it also for holiday lets. And so, yes, in essence, it is definitely possible to do that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Oh, Alan, by the way, says his name is pronounced McAfee. Thank you, McAfee. Alan. And he clarifies that the house had been bought and sold twice before, not flagged up by estate agents and solicitors. Fortunately, he had a good solicitor. Well done.
That's that doesn't surprise me to find that things have happened like that and it's not been flagged up before. It's unfortunately, it's one of those things that quite often people aren't looking for if they don't know what to look for, which kind of leads back to what we said in the beginning about anyone can set up as an estate agent, and unfortunately, if they don't have the experience and the knowledge of what they're doing, things are easily missed. But I'm glad you found a good solicitor, Alan, and got it dealt with.
And where is I've heard of the nota simple. Is that the documents that you can get from the town hall that give all these details about property?
Not strictly, no. The nota simple is effectively a shortened version of the escritura, so the deeds. but it will show whether there are any charges outstanding on the property, be that mortgages, be it any debts or taxes outstanding, or if there's any actions being taken by the town hall. But it's one of many documents and checks that you need to do. And you normally get it from the registro, the land registry.
Okay. Is that in the town hall or is that separate?
Usually separate, because the registro will often cover a much wider area than just the town hall.
Yeah. Alan's just clarified again. He could have been liable to difference in backdated SUMA.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have SUMA where I am. What's SUMA here? What's that called?
Just be sort of fines and taxes, really.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. So next question. Yeah, we're talking about going on to renting. What do you have to look out for? We talked about contracts before, didn't we? That's
we did.
One of the
yes.
things to look out for.
Yeah, rentals. I mean, you've kind of got two distinct markets here with short-term holiday lets and then long-term lets, and the rental contracts you have to be very careful in looking at, because quite often people will want to do like an 11-month contract or things like that. There'll be certain quirks in there that might seem a little unusual, and that's often because they're trying to avoid complying with certain legislation, and there are several rules in Spain. For example, if you've rented somewhere for 12 months, you can then have a right to stay there for up to 5 years. So in certain circumstances, sometimes landlords will try to make sure that you don't quite qualify for those things, and make it more of a holiday let. So yeah, there's quite a lot of legislation around rentals. In fact, that could probably be a whole show in itself, but I'm not sure it'd be very interesting.
Yeah, and it's all very personal to people's different circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of grey areas, as I found out with most things in Spain. Nothing's completely black and white.
Very rarely, yeah.
Which is why it makes me laugh on the social media when somebody says, "This is the truth. This is absolutely what." But it never is, because somebody will come up and say, "Well, that didn't happen in my case. I got it in 3 months, not 6 months." So yeah, that's what this program is all about, to go through the grey areas and give people a little bit of clarity. So, is it difficult and expensive to resell? What's the process there?
Again, this will depend often on location. Some areas properties turn over much more quickly than in other areas, just due to the demand that there is. So it will really depend on the type of house and the demand. I mean, for example, in this area in particular, we saw quite a dip in demand for townhouses over the lockdown periods, just because most of the townhouses here don't have any gardens. They just have a roof terrace. But the demand for corticos and fincas that had land and outdoor space, the demand for those rocketed over the same period. They're starting to settle back down a bit now to more normal levels. But it will often depend on what's the right demand for the property in the area that it's in. But it's not particularly difficult.
There's the particular tax that you pay when you sell a house, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a couple of taxes. Obviously, you have the capital gains tax if you've made a capital gain, and there is also usually a local tax called the plusvalia, which is a much smaller tax but is still paid. Although that has changed in January, there was some changes to the way that's calculated. So there's now actually two ways of calculating it, and you can choose which one you want to be calculated on in order to ensure that you get the lower rate.
Oh, that's very nice of them, isn't it?
Yeah, but assuming you have to pay capital gains tax, then as a resident, you normally pay around 19%, and as a non-resident, around 24%. So it does depend, again, if you're resident, non-resident, what location you're in. Different town halls will charge different plusvalias. So it becomes very, very local again, unfortunately.
It sounds like it'd be quite difficult to buy a property and then in 2 years sell it for a profit, because you've got to pay that 19%.
Well, yeah, the capital gains tax. I mean, you're only paying that on any profit, so it's
Oh,
you've got to have made a profit to pay the tax.
uh-huh.
But of course, with purchase taxes, when you buy a property, at the moment in Andalusia we're at 7%. For properties, there are different price bandings, but that does change depending on the autonomous region that you're in. Some will be as much as 12% on top, and you as well as your costs. So the
Yeah,
property market in Spain, obviously from 2008, took a big hit, and prices have not got back up to that level yet.
yeah,
But it's very regional again, much like it would be, for example, in the UK, where prices in London, for example, will be much higher than prices in other parts of the country. So it's often demand driven. But
yeah,
my advice is often to most people, if you're coming to Spain to live and buy a property and you're not specifically doing property development, don't expect to make the same gains that you might make in other countries.
yeah. Yeah, that's fair enough. This Andalusia 7%, that was kind of a special offer that came up last year, wasn't it? Is
Yeah,
that
it came
due
up
to
last
end
year.
sometime?
It used to be 8% up to a certain price range, which I think, if I remember right, it was around 400,000 euros, and then it went up incrementally from there. But that was extended indefinitely at the tail end of last year. So currently, it stands at the starting rate starts at 7%.
Excellent. In a moment, we'll go through the buying process, if you don't mind, but we'll just
Yeah, sure.
ask one of the questions off the net first, and that is from Vicky Taylor, and it says, here we go. I have a question. If we move, both myself and my husband are self-employed, will we need 3 years of accounts to qualify for a mortgage like we do in the UK?
The simple answer to that is no. However, getting a mortgage in Spain is very different to getting a mortgage in the UK. There's quite a bit in there, because if you're moving over as self-employed, you would need a working visa. So that will be the first place to start, because that's not a straightforward visa to necessarily qualify for. In terms of mortgages, any mortgage advice again is so personal to the individual. But if you take a look on our YouTube channel, there is an interview with Mortgage Direct, who are a big mortgage broker in Spain, and there's a lot more information on there about mortgages specifically. So I think that's kind of a multifaceted question, Vicky. There's visas involved in that and mortgages involved in that, and it looks like you're possibly looking to rent for a year as well. So yeah, quite a lot of that. And the rent to buy option, this is something that, again, we hear or have a lot of questions regarding those, and it is something that does happen over here, a rent to buy or an option to purchase. They're not as popular now as they used to be. A few years back, when the market was a lot quieter in Spain, people would do rent to buys far more commonly, because properties are selling a bit better now. They tend to be not quite as many available, but they are options, certainly.
So is it easier to get a rent to buy than it is to get a mortgage?
Again, individual circumstances, but the problem with rent to buy is you're limited to only being able then to choose from the properties that are offering that option, because not many sellers are that keen to do it. So I would certainly look at the mortgage option first, and see what options are open to you with that.
Yeah, and of course, if you're self-employed and your business hasn't quite taken off in, is it 2 or 3 years' time, when you need to pay the full amount at the end of the rent to buy, it's a risk.
It is risky, yeah. And normally you'd pay a bigger deposit on a rent to buy as well. They're often 20% rather than 10%, and you could be risking losing that if you can't come up with the funds at the end of the day. So yeah, there's a lot of questions to deal with within that one question.
Yeah, and I'll just put up this other one as well. This is from Nay Nash, which I think is a similar question, and it is still all about buying as self-employed. It's I asked for clarification when this one came up on Facebook, and that's because there's I'm not sure about exactly what he's asking. Spoke to a financial advisor in Spain. They said that to move and work self-employed was too risky, as you had to buy the property before applying for the visa, and the account regulations were so complicated. I don't know whether he means the bank account or the mortgage account, or too many
Maybe
questions.
the accounts that you need to, or the business proposal you need to submit for a working visa. That's quite complicated. But no, you don't have to buy a property before applying for a visa. Not at all. They do often request an address and a reason for that. But again, we're dealing with a lot of people where we can help with that. But in essence, no, you don't have to buy a property in order to apply for a visa. There's plenty of people with visas who rent properties and don't buy. So it's not an essential. I think it may be worth getting some advice from a different advisor.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and yeah, of course, and from someone like you who knows about the laws, or pass them on to somebody who knows about the laws there. Definitely. And of course they're in Valencia, is where they're talking about working. So again, there are some different rules over in that.
Different rules and regulations in each autonomous region, although the rules for the visas are the same across the country. So that they should be fine. Yes.
I'm just going to pop up one more before we move on to the next question that I had, and I wanted to mention Graham, who again is a regular watcher, and he's got the Facebook group now. What's it called? Oh, Graham, tell us what the Facebook group is called. He's called Graham After Brexit. Something like that. That's his kind of handle. And he's asking, how long is the normal rental contract, and can the rent be increased during the term? I think we kind of covered that, didn't we?
Yeah, I think there's different types of rental contracts, and of course you can write in that the rent could be increased over the term, maybe a fixed amount each year or a percentage. So there's no such thing as a normal rental contract. There are some standard rules and regulations that apply to different types of contracts, but normal, there isn't really one. Most people, I find, are looking for usually 6 or 12 months rental terms, because that they're either planning on living in different areas, or they maybe are renting first before they buy somewhere to get to know the area. So they're often structured to suit both parties, both the landlord and the tenant. But there are some strict regulations that surround the governance of those contracts. Yeah, great. And Graham, sorry for forgetting the name of your Facebook group. I'm going to put it in the... Graham. Yeah. No, it's okay. Well, I'll know it once I get off here, and I'm going to put a link to it down below in the video description. So along with Go Spain and Tony Stott's group, all of these names, I'll know them when I see them. But there's a lot of groups out there. Yeah, and those are three of my top three, I think. So there we go. Let's talk about inheritance briefly. Who inherits your property if you die? What are the rules? Inheritance rules in Spain are quite different from many countries. There are some rules on who inherits what. My best advice to anyone who's buying a property in Spain in particular, or holding assets in Spain, is to ensure that you get a Spanish will made. If you're coming from the UK, you may have assets in the UK and have a UK will to deal with those. That doesn't automatically transfer to Spain. So if you have any assets at all and you want them to go to specific places, make sure you get a Spanish will done. You can get them made to refer to your, for example, your British will, and say, I want everything to be dealt with under the terms of that, but it's important you get that done correctly and registered at the notary.
Great. Yes, well, we've talked about that question in both of the last 2 weeks. Once when we were talking about visas, and another time when we were talking about health insurance. Yeah, so
Yes.
making a will, really important.
It's really important, yeah.
And how do you future-proof your purchase? That's a wide question that I had. Is this?
Get a crystal ball. I think it's a good question, actually, because I think the simple answer is to maintain the property. It would be a bit like if you were buying a car and you don't service it or maintain it, it's not going to be worth as much later on. So I think if you're talking about future proofing in terms of maintaining the value, then ensure you maintain the property. If it's future proofing with things, I think, make sure you have good quality windows, because they will help in terms of the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. And if you are someone who feels the cold in the winter, have a good heating system. Although most of the time, specifically here in southern Spain, we're more concerned with keeping cool in the summer than we are with keeping warm in the winter, it's more of a challenge to keep cool in the summer.
Yeah, very true. Let's see, I've already asked that question that I was going to ask next. So let's go through briefly go through the buying process.
Okay. There's no hard and fast rule with this, but I can go through the process that we use, and I know a number of or a lot of other agents within the networks that we work with follow. And in essence, once you've found a property that you like, and you've agreed a purchase price and any terms that you might want to agree, and that's always important to agree and mention those things at the very beginning. So if it's subject to anything, make sure that's written in at the very beginning. The process would then be that you would normally sign a reservation contract, or a contrato de señal or contrato de arras, but a reservation contract, which, unlike in many countries where anybody can pull out of the purchase or sale at any point prior to exchange of contracts, for example, in the UK, here it's slightly different. You start off with a reservation contract, whereby you would normally put down a small reservation fee, usually around €3,000, for example, but it can vary from area to area and in different price ranges. That agrees the terms of the purchase. So it agrees the price that you've agreed to pay and that the seller has agreed to sell to you at. So they cannot change the price or put the price up. Also, the seller cannot sell the property to anyone else, usually without refunding double the amount that you've put down for the reservation fee. Also means, however, if you decide not to proceed, you would lose that reservation fee. So it gives each party a bit more protection, and also clarifies the terms of that reservation agreement. For example, it may be that it is subject to proof that the property is fully legal and all of the legal documents being available. Quite often in this area, where a lot of corticos have water rights from acequias, it'll be subject to the water rights being clarified and things like this. So it should be well written to protect both parties. After that, your legal advisor would usually then check all of the documentation, get all of the documents in that are necessary, and thoroughly check many different parts, the catastral, the escrituras, the nota simple, there's any works documents, permiso de obras, things like this. That timescale of that can be very quick. On average, in this area, it's probably around 3 or 4 weeks. But if there's a piece of paper missing and we have to get something else from the ayuntamiento or check something more thoroughly, that can extend to a couple of months quite easily. But in general, if everything's okay, that should be around about 4 weeks. And then you have what's called a compraventa, or a purchase contract. This is very similar to exchanging contracts in the UK, where all of the terms of the purchase are written out. and both parties sign, and you pay the remainder of a 10% deposit at that point. And the final stage is going to the notary, where you sign the new deed, and the notary creates a new deed. And that's the bit that would be known as completion, for example, in the UK. So that's when you get the keys, the property is legally yours. And from there, there's some other parts afterwards. Usually takes around a week or so for the deed to actually be available, and then you can take it to the registro and register the new deed in your name. So that's a short version of the process.
That's very good. Yes, and so it can be a lot shorter than in the UK.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. I mean, a typical transaction in the UK would usually take around 3 to 6 months to go through. A typical transaction here would take around a month to go through. But if you visit our website, there's a section called downloads, and there's a whole list of ebooks in there which explain the process in more detail with lots of checklists and things to help, and they're completely free to download. So anyone who wants a bit more information or more detailed, feel free to help yourself.
Look on that, and that's on Lanhorne Property.
Lanhorneproperty.com. Yeah.
Which I will put a link to in the video description below. I think it's already there. I think I've already put that there.
Okay.
And Barry from Unitech says, make sure the property has good internet broadband for video streaming. That's so you can watch this program.
I've got one. Perfect.
I know Barry watches on a huge screen, so so if we both go like that, we're going to be huge on his television.
Well, that is. I think that's a very good point, actually, Barry, because internet connection is a must for virtually everyone nowadays. Although this appears to be working okay, which is good because I live off grid myself, around 1,200 meters up in the mountains. And so I'm currently streaming via sort of microwave internet, which is so I don't have broadband as such or fiber here. I do in the office, but it works perfectly fine for general day-to-day use. If you're trying to upload 4K videos, it doesn't work. Have to go to the office for that. But for general streaming, Netflix, Amazon, this sort of thing, it works fine.
It's working fine. I mean, we're getting this tends to happen with my guests anyway. The video can be quite jumpy, but that's because Restream, the platform that I'm using here, uses quite a lot of bandwidth. So and sometimes if anything goes on my end, it's the sound. But fortunately, that seems to be working all right today.
Good.
Good. So thank
good
you.
point, Barry. Well raised.
Yeah, and Jason is another regular here. It says it'll be coming to Spain springtime to start researching areas, and in 18 months we'll rent and eventually we'll buy. So thanks for your help. Yeah, good luck with that, Jason, and let us know whereabouts you're coming to.
Yeah, it's a good thing to look at different areas as well. I mean, Spain is such a big country. Particularly if you're coming from the UK, I mean, just Andalusia alone is nearly the size of England.
Massive.
And so people say, I often get that. Well, I say, what area are you looking? They're, in Andalusia. It's a little difficult. So it's definitely worth narrowing down the type of area that you want to be in.
Well, there's a lot of questions. A lot of questions that you need to ask, like if you've got relatives, what's the nearest airport that they can come into? So because I was thinking about moving up to your area at one point, but it's like an hour and a half from Malaga Airport, which is the closest airport we wanted to be near to, because our relatives are in the Midlands. A lot of them. So
certainly important. I mean, fortunately, Granada Airport is starting to run flights to Gatwick again now, so that opens up a closer airport, and I think they're going to be doing flights to Manchester as well very soon.
Oh, that's handy.
So, being within striking distance of an airport, I think is important if you're going to be travelling backwards and forwards regularly or have regular visitors. We kind of took the view that actually we would have visitors probably 3 or 4 times a year, and so actually the extra half an hour drive from the airport is not too bad because we don't do it very often. So it's all personal circumstances.
Jason says Mijas, Estepona, Almeria, which Mijas and Estepona not too far from each other, but Almeria, way different, and much
Very
more
different location. Yeah, very different.
much more desert land out in
Very much so.
the inland, not so many mountains. But that's where they filmed the spaghetti westerns out there.
It is, yeah. They've still got sets there that you can go and visit. It's quite an interesting day out.
And probably cheaper property, definitely cheaper property there compared to Etapona and Mihas.
Absolutely, very different pricing there. Yeah.
Yeah, and but then again, you have the mountains. It's a little bit like that over there. If you go inland from Mihas, there's a lot of views like this, and dotted with little white properties, and Pueblo Blancos.
Yes.
Beautiful. If you're coming for the massive scenery, then you need to be over this end. But if you want the good value for money for property, then Almeria and heading upwards towards Alicante.
Value wise, yeah.
And Valencia as well. That's cheap. Yeah, there you go. And let's see. Let's get back to one of our viewers now on Facebook. This is from Terry, and he says, this is asking for a friend. They're about to put into property in Almeria. There we go. Until her solicitor told them that the land was registered, but not the property. Oh dear. Run away. Does anyone have any experience of getting an unregistered property registered? And if so, how long does it take? The property was built in the 1970s.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to find properties that are not registered. And in most cases, you want to be very, very cautious surrounding those. I've certainly dealt with properties that were unregistered, and the buyer was fully aware of the situation and had taken on the task of registering it. More often than not, when we're dealing with an unregistered property, we make it a condition that the seller has to register the property in order to ensure that that's done correctly, or to ensure that they're taking the risk on. So it is certainly possible to register an unregistered property, and it happens quite regularly, but it's something to be very, very cautious of, and ensure that you thoroughly understand what you're getting into, because it's very easy to get caught out.
Absolutely. So yes, don't necessarily run away. That was just that would have been my reaction. But
if I had to give a general piece of advice, it would be run away. But if it was, because again, it can be very specific to each individual and each property. It's worth looking at and getting the information to see what's needed. But also ensure that the contract is written very carefully to ensure you're covered. And also the price should reflect that. I think for this area, if property is unregistered, realistically, the value is probably around half of what it would be if it was fully legal.
So you might get a bargain. You never know.
You could do if you want to take the risk. A ballpark figure would be around 8,000 to 12,000 euros to find out, to get an architect to do a project, to submit it to the town hall, and find out. This is the problem with the risk with an unregistered property, is that until you put the project in to try and get it registered, you'll not get an answer on whether it can be or can't be registered in most cases from the ayuntamiento. So you're taking quite a bit of risk to then maybe find out that it can't be, and maybe find out it can be, and therefore it was good value in the end. He asked about timescale there as well, and again, it will vary on different locations, but in this area, I would allow somewhere between 12 and 24 months to go through the whole process of getting something registered.
Brilliant. Another question then. Susanna Erba asks, this is a particular question. When buying a property, responsible for arranging the first occupation license, the seller or the buyer?
Well, in essence, the first occupation license is usually when a property is newly built, and so therefore I would expect the builder to provide that as part of the purchase agreement. There's license of first occupation, or AFOs and DAFOs, and you'll hear all these other terms. Again, it comes down to the specific property, because there are often an example here is there are a lot of older properties that might be 100 years old, which the local town hall just won't give a license of first occupation for. It doesn't mean that you can't live in them. It just means you can't get that piece of paper. But certainly for most developments that are being built and urbanizations and things, then really that's the seller's responsibility to provide that at the point of sale. Because if one is needed for the property, you need to be very cautious about buying something that doesn't have one if it's needed.
Excellent. So we'll just finish off the questions that have come in from social media then with this one from Anna Walker. Thanks for your question, Anna. Here we go. When selling a house, do you have to produce all of the paperwork, invoices, receipts for improvements made, which has increased the value of the property?
Great question, Anna. The simple answer is no, you don't have to provide all the paperwork and invoices and receipts for improvements. However, it would also depend on what those improvements were. So if there was a license required, yes, you'd need to provide the license. If you're referring, which I think you're referring to on here, Anna, and sorry if I've misunderstood this, referring to paperwork that relates to the increase in value, which in turn would be related potentially to capital gains tax, then yes, if you have the invoices and the receipts for work that you have done, you can use that to offset against your capital gains, the money that you spent. Again, with tax stuff, there's different bits around it, so this is a general answer, but if you have the paperwork, it can be very useful in terms of reducing your capital gains tax. One of the problems we often find here is people have often had work done cash in hand and don't have the receipts to provide it. So if you've got them, it's a big bonus. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. General advice in Spain: keep everything, keep all of your paperwork in, even if it's in a cardboard box somewhere.
Well, Spain loves its paperwork.
Yeah, you're going to need it one day.
Yeah.
And, especially if you're thinking of getting Spanish citizenship 10 years down the line, you'll find you'll need proof of the fact that you were living here and shopping at a local store 9 years before you make your application. So, keep everything. Get a big box or lots of small boxes. Right. One from Barry, he's saying, do they not have local searches as we do in the UK when buying a property to pick up issues?
Good question, Barry. And that kind of links back to what I was saying earlier on about people sometimes making assumptions that the way things work here in Spain is similar to their home country. In essence, no, you don't have local searches in the same way that you do in the UK. There are things that you can do. There are certain checks that you can make, but they're not an all-encompassing one. Here in Spain, it tends to be, well, for example, in the UK, the conveyancing process for buying and selling a property is quite prescriptive. So you have set forms, the TA10, the TA7 form, which you fixtures and fittings, and your property information form, local searches for planning and things. It's very structured. Whereas in Spain, it's a little more flexible. Realistically, you can buy a property here just by doing a contract between two people and doing no checks at all. It would be crazy. I definitely wouldn't recommend it, but it can be done. And the other thing I find with legal stuff in Spain is unless you ask a specific question, you're unlikely to get the answer that you want. So it could be, is the property legal? Yes, it's legal. But that might be because it's only legal as a nave and you can't actually live in it full time. It's not a vivienda. So that's where you might have to ask, is the property a legal vivienda rather than necessarily just, is the property legal?
Yes.
So it's got to be very specific.
Yes. These are these grey areas we were talking about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Barry. I think we're going to be giving out prizes in a bit, and I think we've had some great questions from Barry and also from Jason Sweeney, I've got another question from him. I think what I'm going to do is give Barry a prize from my regular guest who's back next week, Chris from Up Sticks, and so if we can have your address, personal PM me, Barry, your address, that we can send your prize to. And Jason, if you can PM yours, and we'll give what prize are you giving away, Mathew?
Well, unfortunately, in this this job, it's very difficult to give other people's houses away. So sadly, there's no no grand prize of a property here in Spain. But we work quite closely with a very good legal advisor who would be, as a prize, would be happy to give a free consultation to someone on any specific legal matter that they might want some professional help with.
Brilliant, and that's perfect for Jason because he's coming over to look for properties in the spring. So
Great.
There we go. That's why I thought that would be a good prize for him.
Yep, could be some consultation on visas or on a property. If you haven't found a property yet, probably visas would be the best thing to make sure. If you do need a visa, I'm making an assumption there, but if you do need a visa, what's the right one and how to go about it?
Yeah. Brilliant. So actually, Jason, get in touch via Mathew's website. That would be the best way, rather than doing it through us, because then you'll get there quicker. And just say that you got it through U2 Spain.
I've made a note of that, Jason. So yeah, do get in touch.
Brilliant. Just one little thing from Barry. Do they still actively demolish illegal properties like we saw happening a lot on the news here a few years ago?
I guess, again, the short answer is yes. We don't seem to be seeing the fleets of bulldozers piling in, but of course, what tends to happen is when that does happen, it makes the headlines on news because it makes great TV, doesn't it, to see bulldozers knocking houses down, and it's very emotive for us. We really feel that. So, simple answer is yes, they do. Is it happening on a huge scale? No, it's not. That doesn't mean it won't do again in the future.
But I'm going to pop Jason's question up. It's a question, I think, for another show, Jason. And I think I'm going to do a show. I'm going to get a vet on here, and maybe somebody who does transporting of pets. Do you recommend driving to Spain from Surrey? We have a dog with 2 stopovers at hotels. We drove from Ireland, and we had to drive across the whole of east to west, west to east, and then got a ferry, which was 2 nights, and then we were planning to stay 1 night, but actually we broke down and we ended up spending 4 or 5 nights on the way down. But I would certainly recommend it rather than flying your pet. But it depends on you, really. If you can bear to have your pet in the hold of a plane, where they might get very frightened, but some airlines are really good. There are companies that you can get who take a few pets at a time, and they have a very good transport, and they supposedly look after them really well on the way down, and they stop over and give them walks and look after them, give them good food. So it's a difficult one. You need to get recommendations about that, but I would recommend driving personally. What about you, Mathew?
Well, actually, when we moved over, we did use a pet transport company to bring our pets over, and they were wonderful. They sent us videos of each couple of times a day when they were stopping, just to make sure they were okay, and they came recommended to us. Unfortunately, they're no longer doing that, but I know there are other companies out there that do. So that was the right thing for us, but partly because I didn't want to bring a car here and then deal with the problem of having, the steering wheel on the wrong side, etc. I took the jump that I'll buy a car in Spain. So we did fly over. The pets drove down separately, and then we bought a car while we were here. So I didn't drive down when we moved over. But it was a great experience. The animals were well looked after.
There we go. Yes, that's good. Jason says, sorry for the silly questions. Not silly at all, Jason. There's a lot of people asking them. Jason. Yeah. So let's get back, see if we've got many more questions. We're coming up to the 60 minutes point, and so we shouldn't make it too much longer. So we'll zip through some of these.
Okay. We'll do some quick fire answers.
Yeah, quick fire answers. Oh, what's the usual estate agent's fee when you're buying? Is that or renting? I don't know.
Yeah, difficult to know exactly, but interestingly, fees is something that comes up very regularly because in a lot of Northern European countries and in the UK in particular, There's some very strict rules around charging buyers fees, whereas in Spain there's not. And so there can be some confusion around this. Some agents do charge the buyer a fee, which can be anywhere between sort of 2 and 5% of the purchase price. Personally, I don't think that that's the right way to do things. We don't charge any buyer's fees here. And there has been a case tested in the Spanish courts where a buyer wasn't informed correctly that they would be liable to a fee, and they managed not to have to pay it. So it's something I would ask your agent, or any agent that you're looking at property or thinking about looking at property with, ask up front if they charge a buyer's fee, because it can add quite a bit to the costs. And they're often not very good at telling you that they do. So going back to what we were saying at the beginning about finding an agent you can trust who's being honest and upfront about everything, if they're not being very honest about the fact they're going to charge you a fee, I'd be cautious of anything else that they're going to tell you.
Yeah. And there's also very often when you're making transactions in Spain, they won't quote VAT for you. They'll quote the price without VAT. I've seen somebody falling foul of that and ending up with a bigger bill because it's called IVA in Spain.
Yeah, IVA, which is the equivalent of VAT in the UK. It is charged on everything, and it's at 21% at the moment. So yeah, definitely be aware of that.
So just assume that that's going to happen.
Pretty much, and yeah, or at least ask the question to clarify it.
Yeah. So, quick questions again. What documents do you need to buy a property? NIE number, bank account, passport?
In essence, you will need an NIE number. You can't usually sign at the notary without an NIE number. In the past, it used to be possible to do it just from a passport, but certainly the local notary here insists on having an NIE number. It's a bit of a catch-22 with an NIE number, because you often can't get an NIE without having a reason for it, such as proof that you're buying a house, but then you can't buy the house without the NIE. So it can be a bit of a catch-22. You'll need some proof of ID, such as a passport or national ID card. It depends where you're coming from. But if you're coming from the UK, then passport, NIE number are the minimum documents that you'll need to purchase a property.
There we go. And whose responsibility is getting a surveyor in?
That would be the buyer's responsibility in general. They don't tend to have surveyors in the same way here in Spain that they do in the UK. There are some surveyors around that operate on a similar basis. So quite often you might get an architect to do an inspection on the property, which will be similar to a survey. But for anyone who has seen numerous surveys, they tend to follow a particular format, and are quite often full of so many clauses and caveats that it's difficult to read exactly what is happening. And quite often things will be, I can't comment on what the drains are like because we haven't inspected them. I haven't looked at this and I haven't done that. And this might be the case, but it might not be. So it's certainly worth getting your property inspected, but usually local architect would do the inspection. But there are surveyors around, but invariably it's the buyer that would do that.
Yeah. Okay. Quick question. I heard when I started doing this show, there's a law about buying near a military base. It takes a lot longer. Is that still a problem? Have they changed the law? It was a Franco law, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And again, quick fire answer. Yes, it can be a problem. But the checks you need to get done have recently been reduced. In fact, we were dealing with one just recently with a client who was buying near a base, and the check has been simplified. And in fact, I did hear, although I can't confirm this 100% because it was only this week, that they were removing the check required for British nationals, because it's normally for third country nationals outside the EU. But I haven't had that confirmed yet. But it's something we've heard that it might not be the problem that it has been going forward.
Brilliant. We've got Donna Fryer back on. Hello, Donna. And she says earlier on, she says we're driving over in August with our cat, 2 nights on a ferry, talking about what Jason was talking about earlier. And she says, just a note in case people aren't aware, you need an AHC animal health certificate to travel with a pet. There's a good Facebook page if you search animal health certificate and check with your vet. Thank you for that information.
Yeah, thank you, Donna.
And a couple more questions before we finish. I think buying in the country or buying in the city, the general, are there different rules, different taxes, different mortgages? Is it easier?
God, it's quite a big question for a quick fire answer. Country or city, personal preference. The specific location will have different rules for the local ayuntamiento. So yeah, yes, there probably are different rules. There are certainly different rules around mortgages for urban properties and for rustic properties. So they are quite different in terms of the mortgage rules, and those rules are quite different to what they would be in the UK in terms of getting a mortgage. So again, you can look on my YouTube channel and see the video about mortgage advice.
Yeah. Good answer. Very well done for managing to get a short answer to that question. Good stuff. And yeah, buying in the campo can be tricky. Let's see. All right, my final question. What's going to happen in the next year or two with house prices, do you think?
Again, I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, but general feeling is that I think we've seen a slight increase in house prices over the last year or two, and I think that will continue certainly in the short term, which is contributed to by a number of factors. One being that the housing markets in Northern Europe, the UK, US, Canada, Australia, where many of our buyers come from, house prices have gone up quite considerably in those markets over the last few years. And in addition, the euro is quite low, particularly compared to the pound at the moment. I mean, not long term historically, but over the near term. And so that puts a bit more buying power into people's pockets. Coupled with, we're certainly seeing a lot of people who've accelerated their plans since we've had the lockdowns. They maybe were thinking of retiring in 5 years' time and have decided to do it now. So I think we'll see, in general, prices increase a bit. Maybe the areas that they won't so much are where there were far more sort of British enclaves, with the swallows, as they're termed, who maybe lived over here for 6 months and then went back to the UK for 6 months. And with the 90-day rule, that will have an impact on those markets specifically. But again, it's very, very regional and local to each individual place. I think overall, we will continue to see a small but steady rise in prices in general.
Okay. Because it was kind of the news I expected that there was going to be some kind of crash to do with Brexit or COVID, or but it's held fairly steady. And I've noticed some properties, some town properties that we were looking at have gone down quite a bit, but that's just individual properties.
Oh, I've lost your sound there, Skatz.
Oh, have you? Oh dear.
No, I've got
Can you hear me now? Oh, hurrah. Good. Yeah, I was just saying there was an expectation on some people that there was going to be some kind of crash because of Brexit and COVID, but it doesn't seem to have happened.
No, I think it will depend on the individual location. As I said, if there's a big demand from British buyers who want to have holiday homes, that will have some impact, definitely. In this area in particular, our buyers come from all over the world, not just the UK, and so in fact, I've even had some people say, "Oh, well, we're probably more likely to buy now if there's not so many British coming over." So it will depend on each individual area, but certainly around here with a lot of international buyers from many countries, it hasn't had that big an impact at all.
Well, there we go. So that's just about it for the questions. And normally at this point I give out the prizes, but that's already been done. And so just before I tell you what's going to happen next week, I'm going to say a big thank you and goodbye to Mathew for
Thank you
you've
very
been
much.
absolutely brilliant. Some very,
And if anyone
very
has
good,
any
strong
other
answers.
questions that they've not asked, feel free to get in touch. I'm always happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely, and you of course can ask in the comments on YouTube Spain or for any other general questions. There we go. So it's been an absolute pleasure.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You take care. Let's
You too. Bye for now.
wipe you off the screen. Goodbye for now, Mathew. Okay, so on next week's show, I'm going to be talking once again to our regular guest, Chris from Upsticks. Yes, he's back. All about renewing your non-lucrative visa at the end of year one, which follows on nicely from the last subject of the show when he was on 2 weeks ago, because lots of you who applied early last year, just after Brexit, are coming up to that point right now and need answers. So join us next week at the regular time of 9 o'clock if you're in the UK or Ireland, or 10 o'clock if you're in Spain. And in 2 weeks' time, just a little heads up, we have a TV personality on the show. And so that's very exciting. Watch the Facebook group for hints about who that might be. And don't forget to check out U2 Yoga. It's a lovely YouTube channel run by my wife, Liz. You can get free yoga and meditation classes. So there you go. And also there's a U2 aromatherapy where you can learn lots of good stuff too. And of course, we have the T-shirts and other goodies on our merchandise page. All of the links can be found in the description below. Thanks to everybody who's been on the chat. You've been absolutely brilliant. Barry and Jason and Donna and Lee, who was there at the start, and Wendy. So thank you so much for that. And I'll see you soon. That is all for this week. Please subscribe and click on the bell, ting, if you haven't already. Peace and love, and bye for now. Let's have a little dance to the music.